Hello and welcome to Coffee with Keerthi. Today we have somebody fantastic. I'm very excited and at the same time very nervous because this is not some very small businessman, or even I can't really express the kind of admiration, the kind of inspiration that he has across the globe. He's one of the sharks from the Shark Tank, and his name is Matt Higgins. And I'm sorry if I'm not coming out so well, but I'm really excited. So Matt, welcome to Coffee with Keerthi. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I brought my coffee, everybody, by the way, and I brought my shark mug. And in
Thank you
case you
so
can't
much. Thank
always
you
be
so much.
yourself, unless you can be a shark, then always be a shark.
Yes,
Nice to see
thank you
you.
so much.
Mm.
So I owe you a cup of coffee, Matt. When you come to India or when I visit you in the US, I'm definitely gonna get you a cup of coffee. So I want to kick this off with your introduction of about you're the founder, you're the co-founder of RSE Ventures, and you also are very much into a lot of sports and entertainment and media. You are also the vice president of Miami Dolphins, which is a football team in the US. So this information is for our Indian viewers, so that the Indian people also understand that you also are part of Miami Dolphins. So to start with, Matt, I want to because I was going through your bio on Wikipedia. I saw a lot of videos about you, and I understand that you come from a very humble beginning, right? I want to understand, or rather our audience would like to, and I want you to tell us about your beginnings. Where did you start and how it all began? Where was that entrepreneurial thing that came out, and how did you get started?
Okay, terrific. Well, first of all, it's so nice to connect with everybody in India. I wanted the origin of this interview is I saw a post on
Right.
LinkedIn where
Yes.
you had said it would be my dream to one day
Yes.
interview the sharks, and
Yes.
I saw that post and I said I couldn't resist. I have to start making your dream come true. Even though I think you should aim higher than me,
I'm
but that is
honored.
how it all started. But so I'll take out some of the references that may be more specific to an American audience, but
Uh-huh.
and I'll generalize my background. But
Right.
I grew up very poor in New York City, an area outside of New York City,
Uh-huh.
and my father wasn't in the picture, so I
Uh,
was raised by a mother
uh,
with four boys,
okay.
and I started working, very young, probably around 9 years old, 10 years old. I used to sell flowers on street corners and
Uh,
leather handbags at flea markets. I don't know what you'd call them in India, but flea
yeah.
markets,
Yeah.
these big outdoor sales.
Right.
And so, my early life was always about hard work
Right.
and the sense that nobody's going to rescue you. No
Mm-hmm.
one's going to come along and save you.
Right.
And as I was growing up, my mother's health issues got worse, even though she was a strong lady and she really tried to better herself by getting an education.
Mm-hmm.
But her health issues were getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
And at a very young age, I was at a crossroads where I said I could continue to accept my circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
in which I know how the story was going to end.
Mm-hmm.
She was eventually going to get so sick, and we were very destitute, or I could make a radical decision. And I think this is the most important decision I probably ever made in my life,
Mm-hmm.
is when I realized the system wasn't really designed for me as
Uh-huh.
a young kid growing up poor.
Uh-huh.
And I say this to everybody out there listening. A lot of times the system you're in isn't designed for you. It's designed for the average person,
Right.
which works great if you have everything going right for you.
Right.
But sometimes when you don't have everything going right, you need to come at it from a different angle. So the decision I made in the United States was to leave school.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it would be called by you, but called leave high school at 16 years old,
Oh,
which was
wow.
very radical.
Wow.
And I would take, if I could just do well enough
Mm-hmm.
on one test, I could go to college 2 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why that was important is a couple of things. One, if I was a college student, I could get a much better job than I could as a high school student.
Right.
And I could go from making, $5 an hour, $5 to $10 overnight. Right. And that would go a long way. But also more importantly, like I wanted to try to speed everything up. It was like I could see an iceberg on the horizon and we were going to hit that iceberg. And I needed to change course quickly to avoid it. Okay. And I wanted to speed everything up. And everybody in my life told me, you're crazy. It's going to, in the United States, being a high school dropout back then was something that would probably tarnish your career forever.
Right.
But I knew that if I could prove myself, go to college at night, do the hard work, I eventually went and got a law degree,
right,
that I could get my mother and us out of poverty. So I did. I'll skip to the end of the story, but it all worked out okay. It really accelerated my career dramatically. I went to college for 7 years a night, and then I went to law school for another 4.
Wow.
And then by the time I was 26, I went from working at McDonald's when I was 13, 14, 15 years old to becoming the press secretary to the mayor of New York.
Wow.
So I condensed a lot of hard work in a 10-year period, but my message to everybody out there is don't accept the circumstances you were born into.
Right.
They're, and I know it's harder in different places, and I know it's harder when you're dealing with poverty and a lot of difficult circumstances, but you have to at least try to be defiant and not accept the circumstances you were born into. I didn't. And that's always my message to anybody I talk to. Everybody in the world deserves an opportunity to prove what their potential. And so I believe poverty, your circumstances, race, ethnicity, gender should never stand in the way of reaching your full potential. So that was my big crazy decision, and now I'm a shark on Shark Tank.
Awesome. So 2 things out of what you just spoke, Matt. You talked about radical decision and you talked about speeding up, right? And to your story, I think you started up very, very young, right? So do you think these are some of the really good and important elements of any successful person? Taking radical, crazy, decisions that, I'm not going to stop no matter what the circumstance is. I'm going to be somebody who's offbeat, who's going to be very different from what the crowd thinks. That's one thing. And second is I'm going to speed up things. I'm not going to wait for the train to arrive. I'm going to go reach the train and, get on that train because I'm destined to do something. So you think these are some things that really make somebody successful? Do you think entrepreneurs around the world should be having the sense of urgency and also have the crazy mindset to just be not accepting what the world is offering, but look at the world from a very, very different angle? Do you think these are important elements of success?
Yeah, that's great. Those are great questions. Let me unpack them a bit. Few things I feel really strongly about. Opportunity arrives before evidence, right? And so I look at opportunity as like lightning. You see the flash, but it takes a few seconds to hear the thunder, which is the evidence, right? So in order to make truly transformative change in the world or be tremendously successful, you need to act when you glimpse that opportunity before it's obvious to everybody else. And the problem is, before it's obvious to everybody else, people judge your decisions. And they question your decisions. You question your decisions, right? So it's very lonely in that initial period where you're trying to get going and ramp up. And so it's very important to realize that you have everything you need in this world, that you were born whole and you were born complete, and you don't need anybody else's validation, and you need to really block out other people's decisions. 2, when you have an epiphany or some type of insight, you had that insight because of the context that you live in, right? You either read something on the internet and you combined it with your own experience, and then it's 3 a.m, it all came together. At the same moment it's happening for you, it's happening to somebody else somewhere in the world. So if you don't act on it, somebody else will. I always say a decision to defer pursuit of your dream is to forfeit it to somebody else. So I think by definition, really successful people and entrepreneurs, they're impatient because you gotta get going. Ideas are truly cheap. I don't care, name any insight in the history of civilization, and at the same time, somebody had the same insight, somebody else. The difference is who had the courage to execute on it and to take the chance. So to go back to the beginning, to answer your question, yes, I think you got to be impatient. The other thing I find in my career people do often is they assume that in order to really pursue their big dream, they need to do this thing first. Well, I really want to be my own business person, but I need to work at this company for 5 years because I need to polish up my resume. I always say that stuff is usually nonsense. The reason you're doing that is because you're nervous and you want to, I always say, erect barriers to your own success. And so my advice is always audit the reasons why you're delaying decision making, because usually they're not valid. Most of them are because you're nervous, you're insecure and whatnot. So, but those are great questions. So yes, be impatient and don't settle for incremental progress. Make radical change.
Understood. Understood. So that brings to, a question that I've been, thinking of with a lot of people, with a lot of successful people, do you think self-doubt is always there, that whether this thing is going to work out or whether it's not going to work out? Because, courage is not the absence of fear, right? Even though you have fear, but you still move forward is what is courage all about, right? Now, how many times in your life did you have self-doubt? Did you say, oh God, I'm going to take this big leap and I don't know if this really is going to work out. What if it doesn't work out? How is this is going to be very risky, right? And what if this doesn't happen? Whatever I am envisioning, if it doesn't come true, then all the things that I've stacked up to is gonna kind of have a dominoes effect and just gonna go off, right? So how many times in your life have you had that self-doubt, and how did you overcome that?
So that, I think that's the wrong question. The wrong question: how many times a day do I have self-doubt, and how do I overcome it? In fact, it's been one of my greatest disappointments as an adult. When you're a kid, you assume you get to a certain age. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 45. You assume you get to a certain age and the gates open up for you, right? All the wisdom of the universe is handed to you, and now you're peaceful. And the reality is you never arrive at that place. And so the answer is, even though I'm on Shark Tank, even though I've done all these things that you'd say are successful, whatever, I still struggle with imposter syndrome a lot. I still think, do I really belong here? You know what I mean? And everyone feels a little bit like a fraud. That's a dirty little secret of life. I want to tell anybody out there who's watching right now. I don't care how successful you are in the world. Everybody feels that way. And the reason why they feel that way, because truly successful people are always putting themselves in new and uncomfortable circumstances. So anytime I do something new and slightly uncomfortable, well, of course I feel a little bit fraudulent or like an imposter. And so to be successful and really have dramatic success, it's a lifelong battle with that feeling of imposter syndrome. And the way to overcome it is to hang on my words that I just said. Everybody doing that, anybody doing anything really hard and uncomfortable is feeling exactly what you're feeling. And you need to get over with it. 2, I do something, I contemplate my own mortality multiple times a day. That I'm a big believer in that. When you contemplate your own mortality, it relieves you of the anxiety that we all carry with ourselves often, that the stakes are so high. What if I fail? When you realize that life is short and that we're all ending up in the same place anyway, that I think it gives you a sort of sense of peace. And so I guess my overall message to everyone is, I deal with it multiple times a day, and then I have to pick myself up through self-talk. The one thing I've gotten better at as I get older is I don't really let the critics get to me. I don't really let the naysayers or the haters get to me. And here's why. I always approach it from a place of empathy. If you look at what is the underlying reason why somebody would try to tear you down in this world, none of them are very good reasons that you would ever want to be in your life, right? Either you resent them because you're insecure about doing the same thing for yourself. You're jealous because your life didn't work out that way. You're uncomfortable with change and you don't want change. All the reasons that would cause somebody to try to tear your dream down are nothing that you want to carry on yourself. So I always look at somebody's trying to tear me down and be like, that must suck for you, because I would hate to be spending all my time worrying about somebody else. So I do think that fades, but this sense that you're sort of out of your depth is something you've got to manage your entire life. And last point on this, I always said there's one job you can never delegate or outsource throughout your entire life. Not to your mom or your dad, not to your wife, and that's to love yourself every single day. If you accept that responsibility, you will steel yourself from those feelings when you feel like you're an imposter. You'll say, you know what? I'm going to give myself the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to be as nice to myself as I would be to a friend.
Right.
Right. Like, and that's kind of how I approach it.
Right. So I think it's all about, I think also about, letting go of, I think the freedom that, uh, of even making mistakes, right? Because we all, I think we make mistakes all the time, and it's okay to make mistakes. I think some of the entrepreneurs, like you said, keep waiting for the right time, perfect people, perfect stuff. It never comes because they are not really taking up, or they're not thinking mistakes as learning steps, right? So my next question to you, Matt, is, now, you studied law, and today what you do is sports entertainment media. So what is the connection when you were doing law, when you were studying law? Did you ever think that you will be somebody who will be helping, in building some big stadiums, being part of these sports arenas, and being all this, uh, it's a lot of glamour around these, the sports and media and stuff, and law is something very different. How did that happen? How did that connection happen? When was that you realized that, your niche or your real forte is into, sports and entertainment and media, and how did that happen?
Yeah, great question. It's hard to sometimes make sense of my career journey. I
Uh-huh.
think the reason why is I believe you can extract utility from every experience. There's always value in everything you've done. And
Right.
when I went to law school, at the time, it made sense for very specific reasons. I wanted the credential
Yeah.
because I didn't go to a very good college and I love my college, but it wasn't, a top university.
Right.
I wanted the credential for my own sense of self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
Having a law degree really teaches you how to think.
Mm.
And I thought it'd always be useful to have a law degree.
Right.
But by the time I graduated, my career had already outpaced the value of the degree. So
Okay.
I was sort of faced with a choice.
Right.
Conventional wisdom says, well, now you have to go be a lawyer because you went and got a law degree. You
Yeah,
spent all that money on it, right? And
absolutely.
instead I walked away from it entirely and said, why do I have to do this? A lot of times we feel like we're enslaved to this trajectory that we created.
Right.
So because I went to law school, now I have to go be a lawyer. Who said I have to go be a lawyer? I
Right.
get to decide, right? And
Absolutely.
so, and I think I'm pretty good at looking at every stage of my life and refusing to submit to these rules that operate upon us, right? And I get asked, young people ask me that a lot of times. They'll be, well, my mom and dad feel like I should be an accountant, and and so I always say, don't be afraid to challenge those rules that are operating upon us, because a lot of people
Right.
submit to those rules because they're insecure,
Right.
and again, mom and dad want the best for you,
Right.
and I do think having some downside protection of being a lawyer, an accountant, whatever, is fine, but I'm never afraid to walk away. I'm never, ever afraid to walk away because I trust in myself that it's going to work out. I've
Right.
never regretted for a moment having the, nice degree on my wall, but I've never practiced as a lawyer for a single day in my life.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
I think that that's a really good message, because we all put ourselves into a box, right? If we have
Yep.
taken up, some kind of domain that we've studied, a lot of people, they tell me also that, you've studied agriculture and now you're doing something else, and you're into entrepreneurship. You do a lot of startup stuff. You do a lot of technology stuff. My friends keep telling me this, that you're not a technologist, right? But you keep doing technology stuff. How come you do that? And I keep telling them that, life keeps changing, and we love, we experience something new and we start loving those things. Now, next question to you, Matt, is about Dolphins. So Miami Dolphins. Tell us about Miami Dolphins, how you work, what your work entails, and what you do on a daily basis with all the players around, all that glamour and all of that. And also, I think before that you worked with Jets, and now you're working with Dolphins. How is that different? Because again, a lot of Indian viewers will not understand this, but for the benefit of our American viewers also. Um, how is, moving from Jets to Dolphins? What's the experience been, and how do you, what's your day like in terms of working with Dolphins?
Yeah, I think if you my life is in all these different buckets, and it's a constant battle to try to reconcile these different aspects of my life that are competing for attention.
Uh-huh.
When you do a lot of different things at the same time, you often question, are you doing too many? Are you failing? Yeah, in fact, every day you feel like you're failing because you are failing somewhere, right? Because you have all things on your plate. So you're always stretching yourself like a rubber band. So
Right.
one sector of my life is in sports in general.
Right.
And it's not just the Dolphins. Early on in my career, I helped I ran the business of the New York Jets
Mm-hmm.
for an audience in India, a huge football team,
Right.
not the soccer version of football, the American version of football,
American football.
huge football team. And I learned what does it take to make a sports team successful.
Right.
And whether it, I assume it applies with cricket and applies with European football, whatever the sport is, there
Right.
are only a few revenue streams that make the whole thing work. The most
Right.
important is TV rights, right? That's the biggest chunk of the revenue. And
Right.
then there is season ticket sales. And
Right.
then there is sponsorship from Coca-Cola and whatnot. They're all fundamentally the same.
Right.
And so that became one of my expertise
Mm-hmm.
along the way. And I do think in life, you accumulate these different areas of competency
Mm-hmm.
that then move you closer to your ultimate destination, or at least move you forward, right? So
Uh-huh.
along my journey, I
Right.
knew and figured out what does it take to make a sports team financially successful. And that skill brought me in touch with my partner, Stephen Ross. And
Uh-huh.
then I was able to expand my life to not only include sports, but
Right.
also include investing and private equity and whatnot.
Yeah.
So in my sports life, we do drone racing, which I love. Drones racing 100 miles an hour in indoor venues. We own the largest international soccer tournament in the
Right.
world called the International Champions Cup, the privately owned. In the summer, we bring the best teams in the world to the United States, to China,
Wow.
around Europe. So part of my life is football and soccer, but the reality is I don't get involved much with the play on the field
Uh-huh.
because I don't know enough. What
Uh-huh.
I get involved figuring out how to make these sports financially viable.
Okay.
So for me, it's kind of a fun part of my life, right? Like when I'm doing stuff that maybe is a little bit drudgery,
Right.
this gives me a place to focus on. That's a lot of fun. But I'd love one day to bring an event to India. That's my dream because I'm dying to go to India. I need a reason to go to India.
Please,
So I'd
please
love one day
come to
to
India.
bring a. Well, I'd love to bring a big European soccer match with a
Yeah.
couple of big rivals. We did it in Miami. We
Uh-huh.
brought Barcelona and Real Madrid. We
Oh,
brought
wow.
the Clasico for the first time outside of Miami, outside of Spain rather, since I believe 1982. We
Mm-hmm.
brought it 3 years ago to Miami, and it
Mm-hmm.
was an incredible match. Messi, and it was
Wow.
electric. So one day I'd love to bring some type of match, to India. I don't know what that looks like, but it's a dream of mine.
I hope some of our Indian TV people will watch this episode and will get in touch with you, and we'll try to
Yeah.
get some event done here in India. Now I want to ask you about what do you guys do at RSE? How do you guys work there? You're primarily investing into different companies. One of them is, I think, Fan Vision. You have Tulia, and you have some other really good investments that you guys have done. So how do you invest? And I think last I watched a video of yours in the Shark Tank bio. You clearly say that you're not investing in ideas, but you're investing in people, right? So how do you really make that investment decision, right? First question is, what do you guys do at RSE? And second question is, how do you really, boil it down to, yes, we want to invest in this company?
So we generally operate in consumer companies.
Okay.
And sports and entertainment is one vertical,
Uh-huh.
but media and marketing
Uh-huh.
partners with Gary Vaynerchuk, which we can get into, and our own public relations firm that we incubated
Mhm.
about 6 years ago, which has done great, and food and lifestyle, because
Uh-huh.
food has become an experience, and
Right.
so some great international brands that have done phenomenally, Milk Bar and Momofuku
Mhm.
and whatnot. So the good thing is it's a partnership between me and Stephen Ross. We're not a private equity fund. We don't have investors. We don't have to listen to anybody else's opinion. So as a result, we can kind of invest in what we want to invest in.
Right.
But to break down the philosophy, I always say the fish rots at the head, right? It's always about the leader that you're backing. And
Right.
I've gotten hurt in my life when I found a great idea that I thought should come to life, but I had doubts about the founder, and I overcame or overrode my own doubts, and I usually paid a big price for it. So to me, people make all the difference. We tend to back founder-driven companies at somewhat of an early stage in their development.
Right.
And the key things that we look for are something magical or special. I like to think that everything we've done has a degree of magic to it.
Right.
A unique alchemy that just can't be copied. Scalable.
Right.
I want it to be big enough because one of the things I've learned in my journey, this is a message for everybody out there, like small problems, small companies and small projects and big projects take almost the same amount of energy. And the reason why I learned this on when my wife does construction, we did a house together. And I remember we did a small little house construction project, and it took 9 months, and it was all these problems and contractors not doing what I assume it's the same in India. Nobody doing what they say they're going to do, and contractors late and everything else. And then we made a little bit of money, which was fine. Then we did a big project. Okay. And you know what? We had the same problems, and we made a lot, and we made a lot of money. And when you break, and that's why I love the house analogy. Right. When you're doing a house, you're doing construction or renovation. Right. You have the same contractors every single time. You have the electric, you have the sheetrock, you have the windows, you have the plumbing. Right. Whether it's small or big, and those are where the problems come from. Those are people problems. And so one of the things I've learned in my journey is if you're going to put your time and energy into something, you got to make sure it's worthwhile, because there's a huge opportunity cost in everything you do. So at RSE, we tend to own rather large stakes in these companies, minority positions, some businesses outright, but significant stakes, because I'm going to put a lot of heart and soul and energy into it. And at the end of the day, it better be worth it, right? Because absolutely. Also, if you don't own enough of something, you're just not going to care when things get really tough. So we own significant stakes. We tend to be concentrated, and we get to decide what we want to get involved in. Right. And it's worked out so far.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. I think a lot of good stuff that you've been doing. Also, tell us about your Shark Tank experience now, because we talked about your soccer, your football stuff, your venture. Now, tell us about how amazing is the Shark Tank place where you go and you do those deals and all of that.
Okay. Well, for those who don't know, Shark Tank's a huge show in the United States and around the world, where you have the regular sharks, as they're called. It's been on for now 12 seasons. But Mark Cuban and a group of 5 sharks and entrepreneurs come into the room, and they pitch for about 50 minutes. What you see on TV is around 7.5 minutes. And they try to get a deal. It's as simple as that. But the show is magnetic, electric. To me, it really epitomizes the dream of transcendence that people can relate to all over the world. That's what I love about the show. I could be talking to you in India. I could be talking to somebody right now, somewhere in Asia. Right. And everyone has this dream of transcending their circumstances and being independent. Right. Everyone has an idea at 2 a.m. that they think could be a business. Right. Everyone imagines a better life for their children. I love that. Right. So show's been on a long time. There is no handbook about how to become a shark. They allow a few sharks in every year. Right. And 3 years ago, it was probably, I guess 3 years ago at this point, I love the show. I've watched every episode with my son. And I remember I joked to my son, daddy's like a shark. It's kind of what I do all day. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And I said, no, this is what I could be on Shark Tank. And he's like, yeah, write that. And then I thought, you know what? I could be on Shark Tank. I was like, why don't I add that to my list of crazy goals that I'm going to go ahead and take? And from that moment on, I was like, it almost became like a riddle. What does it take to be a guest shark on Shark Tank? What would you have to do? Right. And it starts with a meeting, trying to get an audience. Right. And I got my one shot on the set of Sony Studios in Los Angeles. I sat down with the executive producer. He was just kind of humoring me, giving me, okay, young man, I'll give you, 10 minutes of my time.
Uh-huh.
But 10 minutes turned into 20, and 20 turned into 40, and 40 turned into 2 hours. And in
Wow.
those 2 hours, I planted the seed about why I thought I have what it takes. And what the show liked about my story is they thought my journey epitomized
Right.
what the show was about, right? Coming from nothing and pulling yourself up. And so
Absolutely.
it took about a year of back and forth talking to them, and it was a whole process.
Mhm.
And then they gave me a shot, and then the game began. Look, I'm always setting the bar higher. I said, what would it take to get back on? Like, because they give like, how well do I have to perform? I torture myself. This is the thing, by the way, everybody out there who thinks it's easy to be an entrepreneur, we're in a culture that deifies the entrepreneurial journey. It's really hard to do these things. It only looks easy in hindsight. So I killed myself to put myself in a position to be successful on that show. And then I got invited back. And I think that's where the pride really set in. That I had reached to be on it in the first place, but then I had done well enough to stay. And I've been on 2 seasons, which is fantastic, and opened up all sorts of doors. So, but I'm always thinking, as soon as this is a question I offer for you and your audience, people always say, well, how have you gone to the top of all these different industries and they're so different, government, sports? And I said, the reason is very simple. Every time I do something hard, I say to myself, what can I do today that I couldn't do yesterday that brings me closer to where I want to be tomorrow? And the answer to that question changes every time. So after Shark Tank was over, it opened up things that I could do that I couldn't have done the day before. That's just a reality, right? Like, it gives you a bigger platform. And then I said, so I remember I went through a little period of melancholy. I don't know if anybody's run a marathon, but I've run multiple marathons, right? Because you're always depressed after you finish a marathon. You miss the training, you miss the striving, right? And so when I finished Shark Tank, I was like, well, that was really hard, and I can't think of anything harder to do. And it sort of left me feeling a little bit directionless, if that makes sense, believe it or not. And then I was in Boston, and we have restaurants in Boston, and Harvard is in Boston. And I was walking across the campus, and I said, this is it. I've always wanted to teach, and not teach anywhere, but teach at the best. What would it take to be a professor at Harvard? And that began my journey, a year-long journey to become a Harvard professor. And I fulfilled that journey last January. So again, a little nutty. I get it, but that's how I do it.
So sorry to interrupt you. So just for your information, Matt, I also teach at some business schools here in India. And I have a dream to teach at Harvard, just like you. I hope someday I do that. Even a little bit will be, my dream come true.
You'll make it happen. I know you'll make it happen. I can already tell you're going to make it happen.
Thank you so much. Because see, and this interview itself is a dream come true for me, Matt. You really don't know how big this moment for me is, because talking to somebody like you at that, I really can't express this feeling. But I'm really.
Now I want to interrupt you and give you some feedback.
Yes.
That I do a lot of these, in different formats, and some are casual. Your questions are fantastic.
Thank you.
And they get right to the heart of the matter. You know what I mean? Like clearly now I understand your teaching, and you cut out the clutter, which is a skill, right? Figuring out what matters most and trying to give value to your audience, which is great, because a lot of times when I'm doing this, I'm thinking of how do I share something that might be of value so I don't waste everybody's time. But you're bringing it out of me. So I'm going to throw it back to you that it's an honor for me to spend time with such a gifted interviewer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So a follow-on question now is, Matt, I want to know about your work with Gary Vaynerchuk, right? I admire that guy so much because, he talks about empathy, right? He in fact named his wine as empathy, right? And I am somebody who also, believes in empathy because, unless you put yourself in somebody else's shoe, you don't know what that person is going through and how things work out. So I'm a very big fan of Gary. And since you work so closely with Gary, how do you guys, put things together? How do you guys, work on any campaigns that you're doing together? How does it work? How does it feel to be working with one of the greatest social media gurus is what I would say. But he's more than that.
Um,
But how is that work happening, and how do you feel about it?
well, he represents many things to me. Gary exists on different levels. He's my partner. He's my friend, but he's also the biggest decision I made to apply my life journey in a
Uh-huh.
business context. And let me explain that a bit.
Uh-huh.
When I was at the Jets, I always said I feel like I had everyone's dream job, but my own dream job. And
Mm-hmm.
that's hard when you're in a job where your ego is being fed every day. But I knew my destiny was to build companies and build things from the ground up, right? I'm much more comfortable in chaos than I am in peace time, just
Mm-hmm.
who I am. And I met Gary in a bagel store in 2009,
Oh wow.
uh, trying to sell him a suite at the Jets, a sports box at
Okay.
the New York Jets. And the last thing I felt like doing was to meet with some random guy in a bagel store and try to, get him to buy a box, but I had to do that.
Right.
But I remember sitting with him, and back in 2009,
Uh-huh.
Gary wasn't much on everyone's radar. He was a little bit of a wine celebrity on YouTube, but people didn't know him.
Uh-huh.
And without the endorsement of the world,
Uh-huh.
Gary can seem a little crazy when you first meet him. So his hands are, whatever, and he's going nuts, and Matt, he's telling me everything, and this is how the world's going to be. And so the first 10 minutes, I thought maybe this guy's out of his mind. The second 10 minutes, though, started listening to some of the predictions he would say.
Uh-huh.
And he would say things like, Matt, the smartphone is going to enable everyone to be both their own content creator and their own cable company, their own ability to distribute it. It's going to open up all these opportunities. But these massive corporations,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what's the biggest corporation in India? What's the biggest one right now?
We have
Uh,
we have Reliance. We have
Reliance. All right, so I was going to say Reliance. So his point is Procter and Gamble, Reliance, Johnson and Johnson. They're not going to be able to move quick enough to deal with social media,
right.
and it's gonna be up to the youngins and an agency. So me and my little brother AJ are going to start our own company to take advantage of this trend that you can't see yet, right? And I remember thinking at the time, I think he's right. Like he said a lot of things that were like, that just, so if you sift through the language of the cursing,
Right.
the bombastic, the hands, gesturing,
Right.
I was like, I think he's right.
Right.
And I backed that vision I had with him. I became his first client with
Wow.
4 Jets tickets,
Wow.
which by the way, this isn't some rocket science decision. It's not, okay, so I gave him some Jets tickets. My point being, I circled back 3 years later with Stephen Ross and we became his partner in the overall firm at a time. And fast forward, Gary will, $170 million in revenue. Like he's, world famous.
Wow.
But what I love about that, I realized pretty early on, the first part of my journey was I'm going to get there myself. I went through a lot of trauma as a kid. I felt very isolated, alone.
Correct.
I was resentful that no one helped us.
Mm.
That was part one. And when you grow up like that, you think that the world is not a safe place. You can't rely on anybody. And you're limited because you want to do it all yourself.
Right.
Phase 2 of being really successful is to submit to the greatness of others. And Gary is the first time where I met somebody that I really loved them and felt like, you're great. You're special. I'm happy to be along for the ride, and maybe I could add a little bit of value to your life.
Right.
I began making decisions like that, where I would look for really special people to support them, as opposed to thinking that I was so damn great. I started looking for people that I thought were better than me in different areas so that I could maybe bring something to enable their dream. That's when you become really successful, when you're willing to submit to the greatness of others. So Gary represents like a dozen things to me, so here's the last piece on our love letter to Gary Vaynerchuk. Like some people will dismiss it and, he's redundant, this, that, and the other. What I love about Gary, there's purity and honesty to his messaging. He means what he says what he means, and he doesn't care if you think he's crazy or whatever. I brought him to speak at Harvard. It was so fascinating because, you have some of the smartest kids in the country, right? In the world, really. And 150 of them. And I could tell in the class, there was a lot of skepticism and like Gary or this, whatever. I have never seen such a radical shift in people's assessment of somebody in a 1 hour time period. It was it was miraculous to watch. I love watching people who come in with a fixed perception of somebody, and within a very short period of time, you see their face change. And a lot of people come up to me and said, that was amazing. Like, and cause he's so smart and, insightful. So the best part about my journey, I'll sort of stop here, is that I have gotten successful because
Mhm.
I leaned into wonderful people and
Wow.
maybe supplied a little bit of something to help them go the distance. And
Right.
that I find much more joy now.
Right.
Even this interview with you, right? Like you said, you had a dream come. The reason why I responded is you said, "All right, I can
Yeah.
make your dream come true." I don't know why it's your dream, but I'll do it. And and hopefully maybe it gives you a little bit of the more of the courage to go after another dream in your life and
Right.
serendipity and whatnot. So
Right.
at
Right.
this point in my life, I love unlocking people's potential
Right.
more than I enjoy unlocking my own, if that makes sense. Like it's more fun.
Yes,
So
I think you just represent something which is very, very spiritual, which says joy or happiness is not about self-fulfillment, it's about doing everything for others, right? This is what we are taught in India also, right? When you do things for others, you just doubles the happiness just doubles, and you keep doing that. I keep following you on LinkedIn, mostly because I'm active on LinkedIn, and I see that you help so many different people, and at the same time you are also somebody who is sharing seats, sitting down with such big names like Warren Buffett. I saw a picture of you and Warren Buffett. I think yesterday it was Warren Buffett, sir. I would call him a sir because respect. So his birthday, 90th birthday, you put in such a nice post about him, and you're that person who keeps talking about the wonderful people, and that's what makes you also great, I guess. um
thank
now
you. Well,
now
I feel like the reason I talk at this part in my journey, it's interesting how you define the word journey, right? You always think of journey as moving far away or new professional success. The last, or not last, but the next frontier of my journey is to work harder and harder on finding inner peace.
Mhm.
That I know that in me, that
Right.
I can unlock more potential if I could be more peaceful. And I always say I'm an aspiring Buddhist because I read everything about Buddhism and the
Mhm.
Eightfold Path, and I'm always trying to
Yeah.
refine my relationship with it, if that
Right.
makes sense. I'm always trying
Right.
to hold on to the present and to
Right.
become awake,
Right.
and but I don't fully commit. And so I'm in a part of my life where I'm positive that has the greatest potential to unlock more peace and more potential in me, is to embrace that practice. And so I think it kind of probably spills out into my communication, right? Because I feel like the best leaders are the leaders who can be present in
Right.
the now,
Mm.
right? And not
Absolutely.
distracted. And for me, the best day when I read my favorite book in the whole world is a simple book called Buddhism Plain and Simple. And so when I read that, it really it grounds me and brings and feels like pure truth. So I think that's the journey I'm going through right now, is trying to, and it probably shows up on LinkedIn and how I communicate and
Right,
try to stay.
right. In a way, I think we both are very similar. We have, and I don't mean to compare myself with you, but I have a lot of things that I can relate to you in terms of getting those, inner peace, and I believe in Buddhism, and although I'm a Hindu, we have Buddhism is the origin of Buddhism is India also, right? And I think there's a lot of
Right.
spiritual stuff there, and I read a lot of things like even Taoism and stuff, right? Because there's a lot of things to learn from all these people. Now I have, I think, last two or three questions, Matt, for you. One question is about, who is your role model? Who do you really look up to since your childhood or even today? Who has been the greatest inspiration for you? How he or she, some person, has inspired you to keep challenging yourself, moving to taking those crazy decisions and doing taking up challenges and all of that? Your inspiration.
It's a great question. The honest, truthful answer is my wife.
Oh,
I
wow.
always say it's like yeah, I married the most amazing partner
Uh-huh.
that you could ever imagine. At least that I could ever imagine. Works for
Wow.
me. It might not work for
Wow.
everybody else. But the reason why I say that is we don't spend enough time considering what is your ideal partner
Uh-huh.
and understanding the ramifications of making the bad decision. And
Uh-huh.
um, I just happened to marry my best friend, who
Wow.
also happens to be the most talented, competent person you'd ever meet in your life.
Uh-huh.
And I can see my life going off in two different directions. One
Right.
is without her, and one is with her. And
Uh-huh.
with her, I'm on Shark Tank, and I teach at Harvard, and I
Uh-huh.
have a joyous, happy life. And without her, it's just a bleak place. So it's a person I admire the most. I learn a lot from. She's very patient. I'm not,
Uh-huh.
just like steadied and measured. So that's one part of my life. And then the professionally, I would say I really just admire Elon Musk. I know it's easy to admire Elon Musk. Everybody admires him, but
Mhm.
I just think it's extraordinary that somebody could defy all the rules of convention
Right.
and yet works out. Logic dictates that it's impossible for somebody to both develop electric self-driving, electric cars
Right.
that would, try to go to Mars and privatize space travel, would
Right.
develop the solar panel business. Now he's implanting devices in our brains. Like, I
Right.
don't understand it, and I love encountering things I don't understand because it reminds me that the rules that we think are fixed are
Mhm.
not fixed; they're immovable, right? Like
Right.
just the same way that at the time when somebody thought no one could run under less than a 4
Right.
minute mile, and one day
Right.
they did, right? Like,
Right.
so I love watching Elon Musk, and then from a values system,
Mhm.
I love Warren Buffett, not because of the wealth, but in
Mhm.
spite of the wealth.
Right.
Here's somebody that had every reason to stray from their values throughout
Right.
the course of their life, and then he held on to them. So for me, I study Warren Buffett not because of how he made money, but
Mhm.
because how he kept himself. How
Right.
did he keep the same house? How did he
Right.
keep the same routines? When I got to spend, I spent a good day with him a
Right.
couple of years ago, which I posted about yesterday.
Right.
And what was amazing here at the time, he was 88 years old, and
Uh,
we were sitting. He was sitting in the room. By the way, he asked for I think it was regular Coke. He asked for a can of Coke,
okay.
and and we were talking about something,
Uh-huh.
and he giggled,
Uh-huh.
but he giggled like he had just discovered something joyous and delightful in a way that almost seemed childlike. And I was like, wow, 88 years old at the time, richest person in the world, maybe now number 3 or 5, whatever. And and he was giggling about the joy
Wow.
of discovering of an intellectual thought. And I thought,
Wow.
that's amazing. So what that tells me is money doesn't change you, you change you, right? Like
Right.
money creates freedom and absence of money problems, and the rest is on you. So
Right.
here's somebody who throughout the course of their life has held on to their values. So that's my sequence. My wife is at the top; she's number one, and then Elon Musk and Warren are tied for different reasons.
Right. Right.
But great question.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So just again, I admire and get inspired by Elon Musk also very much. I don't know if you read my post where you talked about expressing yourself. So one of the
Mhm.
things that
Right.
I want to do is work on teleportation. And I don't know, it's a crazy idea that I want to do. That's what I keep telling my wife, that if I am born on this earth, I want to really make that impossible dream of teleporting a full human being from one place to another place in seconds. I don't know if that is going to happen, but that's my crazy dream. I'm just putting it out as much as possible in the universe so that someday we all work together and make that dream come true.
In
Right.
2004, when Elon Musk went on CNN and talked about how he was going to privatize space travel and go to the Mars,
Uh-huh.
everyone rolled their eyes. He was 32 years old. So now you're talking about teleporting. I don't know what it would take. I hope you do it. I
Right.
love that idea. I love that, and telekinesis are the two things I'd like you to figure out. I want
Right.
to be able to move objects with my brain, and
Right.
then I want to be able to reduce myself to my atoms and be able to travel through like a phone line. So if you could
Right.
do those two,
Right.
sign me
Absolutely,
up.
absolutely, absolutely. I think let's see where that goes, where that dream goes, because it's all about dreams, right? And question here, Matt, is about when people have dreams, and sometimes it doesn't work out, right? A lot of times, a lot of the great people, a lot of successful people have had failures, have had lots and lots and lots of failures, right? Um, how does one keep up with that failure and keep getting up and keep working on it, right? Life is full of struggles until one really good break, right? That break doesn't happen to everyone very soon, right? Some people hit that breakthrough moment. Some people get it very early in their life, some people get it a little later, some people get even very later, right? It means that, everyone comes with their own backgrounds, their own baggages, their own mindsets, their own perspectives in life. How do you, you know uh, keep your dream intact in your head, and you keep moving, and you keep defying everything, and you keep, saying to yourself that, although this is not working out, I'm sure, it's going to work out someday, it's going to happen someday. How do you, deal with such thing? About dreams, I'm talking about dreams, because we talked about,
Oh, dreams.
teleportation and stuff, right? So when things don't go in
So,
that direction, how do you work?
a great question. I think number one, I would say dreams are very fragile in the beginning, and you want to be careful who you consult with about your dream,
Mm-hmm.
because they need love and water and feeding in
Mm-hmm.
order to be able to sprout and flourish. And so you got to make sure you consult with pragmatic optimists. I like to think people who are pragmatic, but they're optimistic, so
Mm-hmm.
they can see the potential, so they don't kill your dream too early. They put
Right.
that off to the side. I think the most common, I've been lucky enough to be around presidents of the United States, billionaires, CEOs, wonderful, great people.
Right.
And the thing that I find in common with them more than anything else
Uh-huh.
is they have a remarkable ability to absorb the wins
Uh-huh.
and reflect the losses and repel the losses. And
Uh-huh.
what I mean by that is they, for whatever reason, do not allow their losses, which some of them are like catastrophic,
Uh-huh.
to define themselves or to even alter their self-esteem and self-worth.
Wow.
And so, but the wins
Hmm.
propel them
Right.
through the failures.
Right.
And so the common denominator of all of them is that they have an uncanny ability to persist.
Right.
So I always say this to anybody, especially during the pandemic, and anybody watching this:
Right.
to persist is to prevail. If
Right.
you can go another day and then another day and yet another, and soon you have 7 days,
Right.
sooner or later you have 4 weeks, then you have 12 months, you've gone a year, right? Like,
Right.
just stay alive another day is really important. So persistence is key.
Right.
How do you not absorb the losses? Is a question I get people ask. How do I not go down that spiral when I'm circling the drain?
Right.
And this is how you do it very simply. When you have a failure, you state, I have had a failure. I
Right.
am not a failure. Those are different concepts, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
very important that you never identify yourself with the failure, that
Right.
you almost become disconnected, a little bit disassociated. And the reason why is you want to be able to look down upon your failure
Right.
and pick out the lessons that are really important, and then
Right.
you want to leave the rest and you want to go. And that's what really successful people do. In fact, to be honest, most successful people are not that reflective. I
Uh-huh.
believe they should be a little bit more. I believe if you could combine
Right.
the will to persist
Right.
with a degree of reflection, you
Right.
could avoid repeating the same mistakes. I'm amazed at how many very, very successful people actually make the same mistake over and over again. So, like, that to me seems very efficient, but they have an endless reserve of grit where the average person might not have that. So I think it's important to never define yourself with the failure,
Right.
to acknowledge it, and then, and move on. The flip side of this, which has become a little corny lately, is everyone saying, failure is amazing. Failure sucks. I mean, it's not amazing.
Right.
The point is you shouldn't avoid success
Right.
because you want to avoid failure, right?
Right.
So, like, I think it's sort of messaging to be slightly recalibrated. Like, of course, failure should be avoided if possible, but you
Right.
shouldn't avoid the pursuit of greatness or your dreams because you're worried about, failure. So
Absolutely.
that's the bottom line. Big picture message is make sure that you need to protect your sense of self-worth and your self-esteem
Right.
by a little bit disassociated from your own failures,
Right.
but to look on them objectively.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
a little bit convoluted philosophy, but I feel really strongly about it.
Absolutely. So I can keep, asking you questions, and
Let's do one more. Let's do one more.
So no, but because we do have time constraint, I think I'm going to restrict you to two last questions. One question is about, you talked about, pandemic. The pandemic has happened, and, a lot of entrepreneurs are hit. In fact, I keep talking to a lot of startup people who are closing down their startups because, they cannot sustain. It's already been 4 months. Even in India, it's been, the lockdown's been going on forever almost, but it's kind of opening up slowly. but a lot of people have lost a lot of things during the pandemic. So how is that you guys at RSE are coping the pandemic, and what is your message to people who are coping with pandemic? That's one question. And the last question is about one message, a general message for all the entrepreneurs. So first
Okay.
question is about the pandemic, please.
So the first on the pandemic,
Yeah.
well, it's been a really tough time in the United States. This has not been our finest hour, unfortunately.
Uh-huh.
Sort of exposed a lot of weaknesses that I think we've had to confront. We just have not been able to have a coordinated approach to testing, and a lot of our country is definitely struggling. Let's put that there, as is everyone in the world. But I think in some ways we've been caught off guard by our inability to rise to the occasion in some ways. And so that's unfortunate. That's something we all struggle with. My portfolio, the companies that we have a lot of food businesses which have been decimated. It's like been horrendous. And the message there, and I think the same would probably apply in India, is in the beginning, there was this desire to get your business open as soon as possible and to do things exactly as they were. It's almost like you're defiant and you're trying to hold on to what's being taken from you by the virus. And I'm going to reopen it. I'm going to whatever. And after a period where we sort of stabilized and took stock, and the first objective was to ensure that you could survive, at least in the United States. Let me extend the amount of cash I have so that I can extend it as long as possible, because this may go on for months, if not years. So that was the first objective. But once you got through that phase, what I started doing with all of our CEOs is to say, we might be asking ourselves the wrong question. The question we should be asking ourselves is not how do I rebuild my business as soon as possible. If I were building my business today, what business would I build? I feel really passionate about that, because we tend to reflexively just want to create a carbon copy of what was. The danger is when we come out the other side of this, I don't know how it is in India. The United States is going to look radically different. And if you build the same business, your business won't be relevant anymore. So that's what I am focused on. I have a lot of reasons to believe optimistically some incredible changes are coming. So let's just talk a few of them, right? And I'll just talk about the United States. You tell me if it's similar in India. But telemedicine, it was always hard to get telemedicine to take hold in the US to the fullest extent. And as a result, people in remote areas didn't have the same access to healthcare. I think telemedicine has changed forever. There were a lot of inefficiencies about how we conduct a business. Like the fact that you and I are doing this interview right now, we wouldn't have been doing this probably 5 months ago, right?
Absolutely.
We had all this technology that we weren't using. We were running all over the country for meetings that didn't need to take place in person. That efficiency is never going away. So when we come out the other side of the pandemic, and the reason why that's so important, it has never been easier in the United States to start a business and get somebody to pay attention to your message than it is right now. Look at us on LinkedIn, right? I posted something about Warren Buffett yesterday. By the end of this day, it'll have 1 million views. You can go ahead and communicate, and you could reach me, and now we're talking across the ocean. So that to me is very exciting. Real estate, I don't know how, again, back in India, but in the United States, there's been an entire reevaluation about how we live our lives and how that working from home is a viable option for at least some of the time. And that's enabled people like me to connect with our kids. I'm not on a train as much as I used to be commuting. So I think when we look back on this period, when we heal, and however long it takes, it may take years. I don't know how long it's going to take, but when we look back, when it all is said and done, this period will have unleashed tremendous period of innovation and technology and speed, more than we had seen in the last 2 decades before that, because we are now much more efficient. And I guess I'm an optimist. I tend to look past what we're dealing with right now and look to that moment where, wow, things are going to be so much more efficient. And so my advice to entrepreneurs, I'll go to your second question, is you have to find a way to hang in there. Like there is always a way. I have never seen a crisis in my entire life, from the time I was 16 years old and facing my mother potentially slipping away from me. And every crisis I have ever been, every crisis opens up a window to another universe where things can be done differently and better. And if you believe in that, the window will open up for you. So you have to be open to radical change.
Right.
Maybe you were running a store and you never sold online before.
Right.
Maybe you need to change to close the store and only sell business online.
Right.
There's always a way, and you have to find a way. I don't care who I'm talking to. There is nobody in this world that can convince me that there isn't an alternative way to make things work if you look for it, because that has been the story of my life. So that is my message to anybody out there who's struggling. Like, I feel what you're going through, and I know it's hard, but there is a way to make it work. You just have to look hard enough for it.
Absolutely. So my last question to you was, what is your message, apart from what pandemic is happening and all of that, what is your general message to entrepreneurs out there, that Matt Higgins would want to share and would, say, this is what is like the holy grail that I really believe in. And, if you also believe in such, way or path, maybe you have good chance of success.
Okay. Wow. I only get one, so I got to go one. I feel so. We talked about this before, but I'm going to pull it forward again. I feel so passionate. Never let anybody put you in a box, and certainly don't put yourself in a box.
Right.
Oftentimes you think somebody else is putting you in a box, but in fact you put yourself in a box.
Right.
You imagine what your parents are going to think if you tell them what you really want to do.
Right.
You imagine they're going to laugh at you when they hear that you're doing technology because you went to school for accounting.
Right.
You have to make most of the boxes we create ourselves.
Right.
And to the extent to which somebody in your life who's trying to put you in a box,
right,
you need to get them out of your life. Like,
right,
that is my number thing. So I think we don't have a lot of time on this earth.
right.
And the biggest regret, when you look at the top 5 regret people have when they're dying, there's a whole book on it called The Regrets of the Dying. The number one regret people have on their deathbed is that they lived their life according to someone else's expectations.
Right.
So even if it turns out you should have stayed in that box, you're better off trying, because at least you won't regret it. Right. So that's my number one piece. Never let anybody put you in a box, especially yourself.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for all your time, Matt. And I'm, like I said, I'm very privileged, very honored, and very happy today that I happen to speak to you, even through Zoom and all of this. So thank you so much for spending your time with me at Coffee with Keerthi, and I wish to bring you again on Coffee with Keerthi. Maybe not, maybe not very soon, but maybe after few months or so, where maybe at that time the pandemic will not be existing anymore. And then I would want to talk to you more and share more of your views with our viewers, with our audience and all of that. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot for coming on Coffee with Keerthi.
Well, thank you for having me. And a last message to everybody out there. I love connecting with people around the world. It's a joy and honor and a privilege. I love to get a window into how other people live their lives. Yeah. I'm over here in the United States. I want to sort of reach out to the world. So follow me on LinkedIn. It's Matt Higgins. And just drop me a note to say hello. And thank you for having me. I will definitely come back, and good luck with everything, and figure out, teleporting, because that's important. and you'll find your way to Harvard. I know you will.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Right, thanks so much. You take care.
All right, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.